till, let's say 1:33 to connect, and then we will get rolling. A couple of housekeeping notes. If any of the journalists have questions, feel free to write those questions in the chat box, and we will do some Q&A when we finish with the speakers. About an hour after this wraps up, this press conference will be available on the Florida Springs Council website, along with footage of this morning's rally at the Suwannee River Water Management District headquarters, including comments that were made there, and a press release. So all kinds of good info for the journalists out there will be available. And Brenda's just put the link where you can find that stuff. The video from this morning's rally is already up. This video and the press release will be up, like I said, within an hour after the press conference here ends. All right, well, it's 1:33, so I'm going to get going. My name is Ryan Smart. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Springs Council. The Florida Springs Council is the state's only advocacy group dedicated solely to protecting Florida's springs and rivers. We've been involved with some of our local groups like our Santa Fe River and the Nestle permit for quite a while now. We just found out that Suwannee River Water Management District Governing Board did approve the 7 Springs consumptive use permit under protest in a unanimous vote. So that happened, I think, literally about 3 minutes ago. After hearing public comments for most of the morning. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. We've got a good group of folks here today. I think the interests that are expressed here, both as far as geography and the various people involved, show just how much opposition there is to this permit and how important it is to the people of Florida. All right. So first, I'd like to introduce Mike Roth. Mike Roth is president of Our Santa Fe River, Inc. Our Santa Fe River, Inc. has been opposing water bottle permits in the Santa Fe Basin for a few decades now successfully, and they've really taken the lead locally in opposing this permit. Mike's going to talk a little bit about his group's involvement in this and the history of the Nestle permit in the Santa Fe Basin. Mike?
Thank you, Ryan. Well, today, the Suwannee River Water Management District decided to grant a veritable water broker, Seven Springs Water Company, with no real property interest in the wells, pipeline, or bottling facility, a permit to extract almost 1 million gallons per day from Ginnie Springs on the Santa Fe River, in addition to the 100,000 gallons permitted to Nestle directly by the Department of Environmental Protection last November, even as the spring and river flows are down over 20% from historical flows and are in continual decline. The original 20-year permit expired 2 years ago, extended because of the timely renewal request. While the request had been reduced by an inconsequential amount, it must be considered that only about a quarter of the permitted amount had been used on the average and never more than a third in any year. Nestle now plans to ramp up production to the full amount of the permit, eventually having the capacity to produce 6,000 plastic bottles full of spring water every minute. Our Santa Fe River, an all-volunteer 501c3 organization, has spent much time and energy providing the board at every opportunity with data to back up the damage that this withdrawal will perpetuate in the Santa Fe Basin, to point out that dry wells and sinkhole activity have had negative impacts on existing users, and that the use of a permit to bottle water to distribute worldwide is not reasonable in a declining water system deemed to be in recovery. Unfortunately, the way that administrative law is written, our Santa Fe River was disenfranchised by the court when we tried to introduce these issues in an administrative hearing last year. Now, because of that limited ruling, issues of damage to the environment and ownership and control are off limits to the board. We're off limits to the board today at this critical, decisive meeting. But Florida law also requires that such permits must be deemed to be in the public interest, defined by this very district as, quote, broad-based interests and concerns that are collectively shared by members of a community or residents of the district or the state. Therefore, we told the board today to consider for the first time the 19,000 objections to this permit received in their own portal, along with the 400,000 petitions of objection that we delivered to them 15 months ago. We believe that if they had followed the district rule and the letter and spirit of Florida Statute 373.223, they would still be compelled to deny this permit. Our Santa Fe River and our associated organizations are committed to recover and then maintain the health and vibrancy of our river and springs. Regardless of today's outcome, we are prepared to take any steps necessary to continue our mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we've had two state representatives that have really been super helpful in closing the permit and even getting involved in some of the minutia we've dealt with the Suwannee River Water Management District and when it comes to public records requests and just their general conduct. First, I'd like to introduce Representative Anna Escamani, who's been a big champion for our waters, to give a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's incredibly frustrating to see the Water Management District make a decision that is not in the best interest of the public or of our waterways. We already know that Florida has been exploited for its natural resources for far too long, whether it's the selling of land or the pumping of water. And the fact is, the decision made today is going to put us backwards in revitalizing Florida's waterways, especially the Santa Fe River, and also in setting a standard for what we consider to be water preservation and conservation. At the end of the day, water is our nectar of life. It is essential to everything that we do as humans and everything that we care about in our state. And the fact that a private company with a small permit fee can be granted permission to pump upwards of 1 million gallons of water constantly is something that every Floridian should be upset by, no matter where you live in the state. We are tied together by our water. And when it comes to over pumping, not only does it impact our responsible farm workers or our recreational travelers and visitors or the neighborhoods that surround these communities, it could also lead to an increase in sinkholes and other type of externalities that take place through over pumping. The reality is that our elected leaders and our appointed leaders are doing nothing to address these concerns, ignoring over 19,000 comments and instead listening to the influence of the water bottling companies in the world. And that's essentially what this comes down to, is the influence of companies like Nestle, lobbying legislators, lobbying water management district board officials, and pushing for their agenda to be the one that is successful compared to the thousands of people that express concern about this project. And again, I want to stress, I think there's a balance here. I mean, of course, from a larger scale, I also think there's a major issue to be said about just the use of single-use plastic and how damaging that is to our environment. But in the context of just pumping water, there's a balance because there are many interests who rely on water, especially in North Florida. And for a major, mega global corporation to privately pump our water, bottle it up, and sell it to people across the world, while the people of Florida just get $115 for it, is a serious problem. And the entire experience in dealing with Seven Springs with the Suwannee Water Management District, I think further elevates the responsibility of lawmakers to do something about this from a policy lens. And we will continue to be advocates in the legislature, in our neighborhoods, to push for more accountability when it comes to the cost of pumping water in Florida, because Nestle might only have to pay the state $115, but us as Floridians will pay so much more with the decision that took place today.
Thank you very much, Representative Escamani. That's very true. We're spending tens or hundreds of millions of dollars right now of taxpayer money in order to do alternative water supply projects to try to restore our springs and rivers. We're forcing homeowners and residents to cut back on their water use, but then we're allowing a major international company to come in and take our water for basically nothing. It's incredibly unfair. Next, I'd like to introduce Representative Joy Goff Marcel. She's been a big help this year on legislation. It's been a pleasure to work with her, and I'd like her to make some comments.
Hi, yes, good afternoon. I am Joy Goff Marcel, and I represent Florida House District 30, which are parts of Orange and Seminole counties. I have a deep attachment to Live Oak as my dad was born and raised in McAlpin, Florida, which is right near Live Oak. And I spent my childhood and most of my adult years going to family reunions there. Although my constituents live in Central Florida, this decision directly affects all Floridians as it poses a clear and present threat to Florida's water supply and sets a dangerous precedent for the future where large corporations will seek to take advantage of our incredible natural resources without accountability or responsibility for damage to Florida's pristine environment. Having access to clean water is imperative to the health and safety of our state. That access needs to be prioritized to Florida residents, visiting families, and individuals, and also the native plant and animal life in the area, not to those wishing to package and profit from the water, ship it out of the area, and deplete what is available to the people and wildlife that live here, and we depend on this water. I'm very proud to today, our office, we filed the blue-green algae bill. We're partnering with Senator Linda Stewart, and this bill would extend the 2020 Clean Waterways Act. So even though it's not directly related to this, anything we can do to promote clean water for our state is imperative. I strongly urge the board to take the consideration of the almost 20,000 public comments, of which 99% of them oppose the action that they took today. And I strongly urge them to appeal what they have done. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you very much, Representative, and thank you for filing that excellent piece of legislation that hopefully will address the other major concern for our springs besides flow, which is nitrogen pollution and the crisis, water quality crisis that we're facing across our state. Our next speaker is University Law School Professor Emeritus Joe Little. We've said a couple times today that although the board did rule in favor or vote in favor of the permit, this is not over. And Mr. Little is going to talk a little bit about future actions to try to stop this permit and really bring more equity to all water use decisions in Florida. You're muted, Joe.
Thank you. I'm Joe Little. I'm a lawyer, and I represent the Florida Defenders of the Environment, our Santa Fe River, whose Mike spoke earlier, and two named individuals. The Florida law has something called the Environmental Protection Act, which permits private citizens, such as those I represent, to file an application or petition with a governmental agency that's not doing its job in terms of what it's supposed to do. Our position is that the public interest of Florida does not permit the selling of water that's owned by the people of Florida under the law of Florida without obtaining the monetary value of the water itself for the state of Florida on behalf of the people of the state of Florida. This permit that was approved today and the permit that exists both failed that test. Under this statute, the board that we petition has the authority to make its own decision to eliminate the defects that we believe we've called to their attention. If it does not do so, then the plaintiffs have satisfied a condition precedent to bringing an action in circuit court to test the question of whether or not it's consistent with the public interest of Florida to give away the very valuable waters of Florida in the way that this permit does. I will be speaking with or conferring with my clients to see whether my clients wish to take the next step of filing this action in circuit court. I might mention that there are a number of novel matters involved in this approach that we're taking that, so far as I'm aware, have not been resolved in prior cases. One of the matters will be, well, what about the fact that we may have a circuit court action going at the same time that the district files a petition in the District Court of Appeal on a little different grounds, no doubt, but nevertheless challenging the same action. So I think we've got some potential, perhaps far-reaching litigation ahead of us in this matter.
Thank you, Joe. That's very interesting and very good to hear. Last but not least, we have Mary Grant, who is a campaign director with Food and Water Watch. Food and Water Watch has not only been involved in opposing the Nestle permit, but has been opposing water bottling and the privatization of water across the country for many years. Mary?
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Grant, the Public Water for All campaign director at Food and Water Watch. We are a national environmental organization with around 80,000 members and supporters in Florida. And we are incredibly disappointed in the board's decision today, but we urge the community to not give up and to keep fighting Nestle. Across the country, community-based organizations like our Santa Fe River have come together to fight the harmful water withdrawals of the bottled water industry. And that's because bottled water corporations like Nestle have terrible track records. In Michigan, after Nestle began pumping groundwater from an aquifer, water flows in the connected surface waters fell to the point that mud flats developed. When bottled water companies withdraw water, they don't replenish it. Large-scale water extraction, like for bottling plants, can reduce the availability of local water supplies. During the historic California drought several years ago, some bottled water companies, including Nestle Waters North America, continued to take and bottle groundwater throughout the state. Nestle Waters North America actually increased its water withdrawals by 19% during this drought. And its CEO at the time refused to consider moving bottling operations out of California, saying, absolutely not. In fact, if I could increase it, I would. In Oregon and Washington state, the company tried for nearly a decade to open a bottling facility along the Columbia River Gorge, but town after town resoundingly rejected Nestle. In Cascade Lots, Oregon, the company wanted to extract 100 million gallons a year from a spring that the state maintained for a fish hatchery that raises endangered salmon. The proposal would have increased traffic on local roads by up to 200 trucks a day. In 2016, because of the Local Water Alliance, voters in Hood River County, Oregon, passed the nation's first ban on commercial water bottling extraction to stop this scheme. It's possible to stop Nestle. Communities across the country are doing it. And in this era of a climate crisis that threatens our basic access to clean water, it is more important than ever to stop the damaging withdrawals of the bottling industry. So let's say it loud and let's say it clear. Water belongs to the people, not Nestle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So we're going to open it up for questions in a second here. And what I'd ask the reporters to do, if you have a question, hit the little raise your hand icon. I'll call on you and we'll unmute you and you can ask away. I think if there's a takeaway here, it's that even though the governing board did issue a ruling under protest today, this issue is by no means over, whether it's the larger issue of water bottling and how we regulate our water use. We've heard from the legislators that there's legislation currently being considered and that will be filed in the future that will either curb down on these kind of uses or force consumptive users to pay a reasonable fee so that that burden is not falling on the taxpayer. We've heard from Attorney Little that there is pending litigation that could go on to try to force that issue right now in circuit court. And I can speak on behalf of the Florida Springs Council that we're looking at everything that we can do to oppose this permit and future permits that threaten Florida's water supply and our natural resources. So now I will open it up for questions. And Bruce Ritchie is literally raising his hand. So you win, Bruce, go for it.
Thank you. I don't see a raise hand button. Professor Little, perhaps you could answer. The board voted 7-0 to approve under protest. and was told that doing it under protest would preserve their right to appeal. But several of the board members expressed opposition to to filing an appeal. Does that grant your clients or any other groups the option of appealing the same issues that the district has concerns about in the order?
You're muted, Joe.
Bruce, the position that my clients have taken is entirely different from appealing the administrative decision that was made today. Our position is one that we will, if we bring it, will be brought in circuit court, and the circuit court will be permitted or will be asked to litigate the question of whether it's inconsistent with the public interest of Florida to give away Florida's waters that belong to the people of Florida. So the answer to your question is no, we will not be attempting to stand in for the district in making an appeal to the District Court of Appeal. If we go forward, it will be in the circuit court.
And do you think it's possible that someone could stand in for the district and do that? Not whether it's likely, but just does it, or is that procedurally not possible?
Well, I'm not really prepared to answer that question. I am aware that there were some persons who attempted to intervene into the administrative matter, and I think Mike could speak to that, and they were denied the authority to intervene in the administrative matter. Now, whether or not that process retains a right to appeal the denial to the district court, I'm not prepared to say. I'm just not prepared on that issue, Bruce.
Well, do any of y'all feel it was meaningful that the district approved this under protest?
Bruce, I would say it's only meaningful if they use, I mean, the only benefit of that is if they use that to appeal. So if they choose not to go forward with appeal, then it's no different than approving it outright. I will say that it's my understanding that the district did not raise every issue in their litigation. They had a very narrowly focused reason for denying the permit, which is what the administrative law judge's ruling was subject to. And there are other interests regarding the broader public interest and things like that that have not been litigated and could be.
Basically, if I might add, a lot of the important issues were not litigated. Unfortunately, the staff let us down. The staff of the Water Management District did not raise the predominant issues here, the issues of ownership and control, the issues of true public interest, and scientific issues too, as to the degradation of the river and the springs, and the effects of this permit on it. So there are plenty of issues left to raise, and I do believe that we can bring them. The question is whether the district will allow us to. My understanding of the procedure from here is such a complaint, such a petition would go to the district, and the district would have to decide whether or not to forward it to DOA. So that'll be in their hands. But I expect that our Santa Fe River and others will be looking into those kinds of appeals.
Other questions? Greg.
Let me ask Ryan or Mike or anyone, then with this ruling, with this vote today, then do we expect that Nestle can, or Seven Springs and Nestle can start bottling water immediately? How quickly will operations then start moving up to that nearly 1 million gallon a day measure that we're talking about?
Well, Nestle's been on their schedule since the beginning. They've been bottling water throughout this period. The permit actually expired in June of 2019. But because that they filed timely, they're kind of grandfathered in until this permit decision was completed. So they've been on, and they've been moving forward with their build out, with their projections, with all of their bottling. They're still not bottling nearly. They're not even bottling it, to my understanding, yet at the quarter to the third that it was bottled previously. But by 2025, they plan to be up to full capacity, which is the full allocation, the 984 plus the 100, and again, rolling off 6,000 bottles a minute.
And can I ask about the ownership issue, the fact that Nestle wasn't put on the permit? Does this have to do, does that become crucial because of this idea that they're selling their water bottling company? Just give me some sense and background on that.
Seven Springs is the applicant. Seven Springs Water Company owns none of the wells, the pipelines, or the bottling facility. Seven Springs owns 1.5 acres approximately east of the bottling facility. All they have are is an extraction agreement with the owner of the property where the wells are, and that's it. So there really is no property interests involved here, and property interests are required. So we think that it is a substantial argument, and I think that's why Attorney Reeves was saying that it is substantive, and he feels they can be successful at appeal.
And is there any relevance to the fact that Nestle's talking about selling their water bottling company here? Does that enter into this at all?
Not really directly in our case, because there's a broker in the deal. The permit is to Seven Springs, and it's kind of Seven Springs' responsibility to make sure that whoever owns One Rock or whoever owns the permit maintains the conditions of the permit. If not, then the district will surely come down and tell Seven Springs that they can't continue.
All right, we have a question from Daniel that I'll put to Joe Little originally, but I know there's been some legislation, so maybe one of the representatives has thoughts on this too. Joe, you mentioned the monetary value of water. Have you come up with a figure of what that value is? And you're muted.
Okay. I don't know what the monetary value is. That would need to be computed. But if you take it as a penny per gallon, and you assume that the entire 400 million gallons are drawn in a year from the well, then that would be $4 million for the year. Now, penny a gallon sounds low to me in terms of the monetary value of the water itself, but I just wanted to give you a low figure. And I can't give you a better figure because I don't have the economic data and I don't have the economic expert knowledge to do it either. But it's a substantial amount of money, in my opinion.
Well, and just to add to that too, there has been policies filed, especially last session when this issue in particular bubbled up. Other lawmakers did bring forth different water policy to put a ticket price per gallon. But the fact doesn't escape me that, you know, as a citizen, I pay when I use water. I pay right for my faucet. And so the fact that a private company like Nestle can just come in, negotiate with a private seller on a cost that we're not privy to is a major concern just when it comes to public transparency. And I have met with the Nestle lobbyists before. The second you start tweeting at Nestle, they get really upset and want to meet with you. And they do not provide transparency on how much they're actually negotiating with these private landowners when it comes to the cost of water. And so the public is in the dark. It's a public good, and yet it is pumped by private companies with very little consequences. And then we pay the damaging cost of water restoration projects and trying to revitalize the Santa Fe River and other waterways. It does not make sense, and it is dangerous long-term to operate like this. And so we need political courage to do something about it as a legislature. And I am damn proud to be part of those efforts. I'm not going to stop until we get some sort of consistent measurement in place that values this public good. And so that corporate decisions are made without consequences, that they're made with some sort of sense of responsibility to the people of this state and to our water.
And I would add, I think Senator Tadeo does have the water bottle fee water use bill back in the Senate this year. That was out last year. And if I remember, it's 12.5 cents per gallon is what's being proposed in that legislation, sorry. And if I remember correctly, that was a estimate of what they would be paying if they were pulling it from a public water supply. So that was trying to put, essentially bottled waters at a par with large water users who get their water from a public water supply. Another question is, what is the cost to our environment and people of those water withdrawals? And I think that's a harder equation, but also important. Any other questions? All right, well, as I said, there's a link in the chat box for where you can find a recording of this press conference, as well as a video from this morning's rally and a press release that will all be available within an hour of now. So by 3 o'clock, feel free to contact me or any of the speakers if you have further questions. I really appreciate all my speakers showing up today and taking, not just today, but everybody here has been involved in this issue for a long time. This isn't the end. We're still in the middle of the fight, and we're all going to keep moving. And I appreciate all the journalists showing up to hear what we have to say. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.